It began with the funeral. Grandma Elsie had always been a strange woman. Silent dinners, locked drawers, and whispers in the dark halls of her ivy-covered Victorian home. When she died, the world barely noticed. But for me, Ivy Blackwell, the loss was heavier than I'd expected. She was the last family I had left. At just 23, I stood in a cold cemetery under a slate-gray sky, clutching a will in one hand and an iron key in the other. The will was simple. To Ivy, I leave the Blackwell estate, and the box. Do not open it after dark. That was all it said. No lawyer's explanation. No list of assets. Just the old house on Briar Hollow Road and the box. When I stepped into the house, the air smelled of mothballs, dust, and something else, something sharp like wilted roses and iron. The wind howled against the warped shutters, and the wood beneath my boots groaned as if the house resented being awakened. I found it on the fireplace mantel, a small, ornate music box with swirling carvings of vines and a single rose etched on its top. It was silver, but tarnished with age. I reached for it with trembling fingers, and as soon as I touched it, I felt a chill coil around my wrist. I snapped my hand back. It was just a music box. I told myself that again and again. But when I picked it up, I noticed something strange. It had no key to wind it. And yet, when I held it up to my ear, I could almost swear I heard something faint inside. A heartbeat, a whisper, or a music note struggling to be born. I put it down, heart racing. Maybe grief was playing tricks on me. That night, I unpacked in my grandmother's bedroom. The bed was still made, crisp and untouched. Her perfume lingered in the sheets, something old-fashioned and powdery. I tried to sleep, but the silence pressed down like a wet blanket. Then, at exactly 3:33 a.m., the sound began. Soft, sweet, almost melancholic, a lullaby in a minor key. The music box was playing. I sat bolt upright. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't wound it. But the sound drifted through the house, faint at first, then louder. I crept down the stairs, flashlight in hand. The music came from the living room, where I had left the box. It sat motionless on the mantel, lid closed, yet the melody continued. The air had turned icy. My breath came out in puffs. I stepped closer. The song ended with a long, trembling note. Then silence. I reached for the box again. It was cold, too cold, as if it had been sitting in a snowbank. I lifted the lid slowly, half expecting something to leap out. But it was empty, just velvet lining and a small inscription carved inside. What was lost will return. The next morning, I told myself it had been a dream, until I heard the footsteps upstairs. At first, I thought it was just the old house settling. But the rhythm was unmistakable, footsteps pacing back and forth in the attic that had been locked since before I was born. I took the key that came with the will and climbed the narrow stairs. My hand shook as I unlocked the door. It creaked open, revealing dust-covered trunks, furniture draped in sheets, and cobwebs hanging like curtains, and someone standing in the corner. I screamed, stumbling back. But the figure didn't move. It was a woman, tall, thin, wearing a faded black dress. Her face was hidden beneath a lace veil. My heart thudded. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. "Grandma," I whispered. She turned, and I saw her face, pale, gaunt, lips stitched shut with black thread. Her eyes locked on mine, filled with sorrow. Then she vanished, dissolving into mist. I slammed the attic door and bolted down the stairs. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched the clock as it crept toward 3:33 a.m. I waited, breath shallow, and right on time, the music box began to play. The second night, it brought someone else. This time, it was my mother. She had died in a car crash when I was 6. I barely remembered her, but as soon as I saw her face in the hallway mirror, I knew. She stood behind me, smiling softly. Her dress was torn, her skin mottled with bruises, but her eyes were kind. "Ivy," she whispered. I turned. She was gone. The third night, I left the house. I couldn't bear to hear the music again. I parked at a gas station 10 miles away and waited in the fluorescent light, clutching a cup of coffee like a lifeline. When I returned at sunrise, the house was different. Every mirror was shattered. The music box sat on the kitchen table, lid open, melody frozen mid-note. I called a priest. He was kind, middle-aged, and skeptical. He listened patiently as I told him everything. "A music box that plays at 3:33, he said, rubbing his chin. "That's the devil's hour." I blinked. "What?" He nodded. "Folklore says at 3:33 a.m. is when the veil between the living and the dead is thinnest. Spirits can pass through, and if something is inviting them." He left holy water, a rosary, and a warning. "Don't open that box again." But I hadn't opened it. It opened itself. That night, I sat in the living room, staring at the music box. I'd placed it inside a glass container, surrounded by salt, with a rosary draped over it. 3:32. My heart raced. 3:33. Nothing. I exhaled. Then the melody began, muffled, like it was coming from inside the walls. The glass cracked. The rosary slid to the floor. The salt blew away in an invisible gust. And the lid creaked open. This time, it wasn't a family member. A man stood in the doorway, tall, wearing a coat from the 1800s. His eyes were hollow. One hand held a lantern. The other pointed at me. "Ivy Blackwell," he said. "You opened the door." I couldn't move. My limbs were paralyzed. The man stepped forward, passing through the salt circle as if it weren't there. "You carry her blood," he said. "You carry her debt." I tried to scream, but my voice stuck in my throat. Each night, they return, but they do not come alone. Then he vanished. I ran upstairs, slammed the bedroom door, and shoved furniture against it. I stayed awake until dawn. When morning came, everything looked normal again, except for the writing on the wall, scrawled in soot above the music box. "You cannot keep the dead." I didn't sleep the next night. I couldn't. My mind replayed the man's hollow voice on an endless loop. "You carry her blood. You carry her debt." What debt? What had my grandmother done? Why was I paying the price? The sunlight filtering through the dusty curtains gave me a small illusion of peace. I stood in the living room, staring at the music box. It was silent now, mocking, almost. The inscription inside haunted me. What was lost will return. But they weren't just returning. They were crossing over. I scrubbed the soot message from the wall, but the pressure in the air remained, like something was watching me, waiting. By noon, I was digging through the attic. Dust choked the air, and the floorboards screamed beneath every step. I tore open old trunks, yanked books from hidden compartments, desperate for anything that could explain what was happening. In a leather-bound journal, tucked beneath yellowed lace, I found it. Grandma Elsa's handwriting, elegant, spidery, and increasingly erratic toward the end. Her entries painted a chilling portrait of obsession and fear. July 3rd, 1949. The box came from Madame Lavinia, the Romani woman on the outskirts of Lock Hollow. She called it a mourner's relic. Said it was once used in death rites to call back lost souls. Said it would give me what I asked for, but everything has a price. July 10th, 1949. I heard his voice. "Charles, my husband." He came back, only for a moment, but I heard him say my name. The box played all on its own. Exactly 3:33 a.m. I thought I was mad. I'm not. August 2nd, 1949. They don't stay. They can't stay. But they want to. And now others are coming too, ones I never called. Ones I don't recognize. I've tried hiding the box. It always finds its way back. October 30th, 1949. I made a deal. To bring Charles back. To keep him. But it wasn't really him anymore. I locked the box after that, sealed the attic, and prayed no one else would ever hear that song again. I dropped the journal, heart pounding. My grandmother had brought someone back from the dead, and now, decades later, I'd inherited the consequences. I tried to leave the house, packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and ran to my car. But when I turned the ignition, nothing happened. Not a click, not a hum. Just silence. I reached for my phone. It was dead. Not just out of battery. Dead. I tried the landline in the kitchen. The line buzzed, then hissed, and then music. The lullaby, playing softly through the receiver. I slammed it down and screamed. As the sun dipped, shadows stretched across the house like fingers. I boarded up the living room, locked every door. I moved the music box to the basement, wrapped in cloth, and placed it inside an old trunk. I poured salt around it, blessed water, anything I could think of. But when the clock struck 3:33 a.m., the lullaby played from under the floorboards. This time, the footsteps came in pairs. I held a kitchen knife as I heard them walking, slow, deliberate, through the hole, up the stairs. My bedroom door creaked open. 2 figures stepped inside, a woman with her head turned backwards, and a boy whose eyes were completely black. They stared at me, unmoving. Then, as if guided by shared thought, they turned to the wall and began scratching, fingernails scraping into plaster, carving letters into the paint. "We are owed." They turned, blinked in unison, and faded away. The next morning, I took the music box to the woods behind the house. I buried it 5 feet deep beneath a sycamore tree. That night, the music played louder than ever. And when I went downstairs the next morning, the box was sitting on the mantel again, dirt still clinging to its corners. I ran back to the sycamore tree. The ground hadn't been disturbed. The hole was still there, and empty. I fell to my knees and screamed. That's when I heard someone behind me. "Ivy." I turned. A woman stood at the edge of the woods, wrapped in a long cloak, her face aged and sharp. She had eyes like wet coal and wore strings of charms around her neck. "I've been waiting for you," she said. "You've opened the box." "Who are you?" "I'm Lavinia. I gave that box to your grandmother. I warned her. She didn't listen." I staggered back. "You're supposed to be dead." "I am, but not like them." She gestured toward the trees. In the distance, shadowy forms flickered between trunks, dozens of them, watching, waiting. "You've let them in, child, and they are hungry." I stared at her, terrified. What do I do? How do I stop it? Lavinia walked toward me, her feet not touching the ground. "You can't. The box is tied to blood. It's a contract. You are the last of the Blackwell line. As long as your heart beats, the door stays open." I shook my head. "There has to be a way." "There is," she said, eyes narrowing. "But it comes at a price." "What kind of price?" Lavinia didn't answer. She vanished into the mist. I stumbled back to the house. The windows were open. The curtains billowed like lungs inhaling. Every mirror in the house was shattered again. On the wall, new words were written in ash. Choose. Who stays? Who leaves? That night, I didn't sleep. I sat beside the music box, watching it, waiting. When 3:33 a.m. came, the lid opened on its own. The melody began, softer now, almost gentle. Someone knocked on the door. 3 slow knocks. I rose, heart slamming against my ribs, and opened it. A little girl stood there, pale, silent, her dress torn, her hands shaking. "I can't find my mommy," she said. I backed away. "Please," she whispered. "Who are you?" "My name's Eliza. I drowned." I froze. Behind her, more shadows gathered. Dozens of them. Hundreds. And in the center of the crowd stood my grandmother. She stepped forward. "You brought them, Ivy," she said. "You invited them back. Now choose." The shadows surged forward. The figures swarmed toward the porch like a tide of shadows, and all I could do was back away. The girl, Eliza, still standing in the doorway, staring up at me with dead, pleading eyes. I don't know how to choose. I cried, but my grandmother stepped forward from the wall of the dead, her once kind face cold, her voice flat. "You'll learn, or the box will choose for you." Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they vanished. The air thinned. The floor beneath me stopped pulsing. The music box clicked shut. I collapsed on the hallway floor and cried until my voice broke. By morning, I looked like something the dead would pity. My eyes were hollow. My hands shook even when I tried to hold still. I avoided mirrors now, each one cracked after every night. I had replaced 3. They shattered again the next day. They weren't showing my reflection anymore. They showed them. People I didn't know. Their deaths. Their faces twisted in pain, staring back at me. I drove to the edge of town, parked on a gravel road near the old church, and considered smashing the music box into 100 pieces and tossing them into the river. But a voice in my head whispered, if you destroy it, they stay. It wasn't about banishing them anymore. It was about controlling what came through. Or was, who stayed behind. I drove home, sat in the living room, laid the box on my lap, stared at it for hours. Around 8 p.m., the phone rang. A real call this time. It was my neighbor, Marcus, from 2 houses down. He'd always been friendly, retired electrician, loved gardening. But tonight, his voice trembled. Ivy, I don't mean to sound crazy, but there was a girl outside my house. My stomach dropped. What did she look like? Pale, long black hair, wore some kind of old dress. She kept pointing toward your house. My grip tightened on the phone. Don't open your door. Do you hear me? Don't open. Click. Deadline. I ran down the street in bare feet, the cold biting into my soles. Marcus's porch light was on. The door swung slightly open. Inside, the silence was deafening. I stepped into his kitchen. Everything looked normal. A coffee mug sat half full on the counter. His favorite oldie station played softly in the background. Then I saw the back door, wide open. Beyond it, just a night, empty and dark. I never found Marcus. Just a smudge on the floor that looked like soot and the faint smell of lake water and roses. I called the police, lied and said he might have wandered off. They did a search, found nothing. That night, at 3:33, the box played its tune, and Marcus's voice whispered through the vents. Ivy, help. I screamed, begged the voices to stop, but they only got louder. And then, an idea. The journal. There was something I missed. I tore back into the attic, flipping through Elsa's old diary. Then I found it, a passage buried near the end, in frantic, erratic writing. There's a balance, she wrote. One soul for another. You can't just bring them back. You have to give something. The music box chooses until you do, until you offer a name. Then, only then, will it leave you be. For a time. My blood ran cold. It was a trade. The music box demanded balance, resurrection for sacrifice, and the longer I refused, the more it chose for me. I started to notice people around town going missing. A mailman who always whistled as he walked, gone. A woman from the bakery, vanished. Each one whispered back through the music, all traced back to me. I was the gate now, the doorway. It was choosing for me because I refused to choose. That night, as 3:33 approached, I stared at the names written on a page in front of me. I was shaking, hand hovering over the list. If I offered a name, someone else might live. If I didn't, someone innocent would vanish. The music started. I hadn't opened the box. It did that on its own now. Its melody filled the house like fog creeping through floorboards. This time, no ghosts came. Just silence after the last note played. Until I turned and saw the girl again. Eliza. She wasn't at the door now. She was in the living room, sitting on the couch, holding something. A broken picture frame. It was of me and my parents, years ago, before the car crash. When we were happy, I swallowed. Why are you here? She looked up, her voice soft. You have to send someone, or I stay. What does that mean? She tilted her head. If I stay, others stay too. The gate stays open. I dropped my knees. I don't know who to send. She got up, walked toward me, took my hand. Then the box will choose. As her hand touched mine, a pulse of cold shot through my body. The music box slammed shut on its own. I passed out. When I woke, it was morning, and I wasn't alone. A man was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at me with hollow eyes. Blood matted his hair. I was a coal miner, he said, buried alive in 67. I remember the dote in my throat. I bolted, ran to the police, tried to explain, but they found nothing in my house. No ghosts, no strange man, just the music box, and on it, A new inscription. You didn't choose. We did. I returned home that night with a new fear. I wasn't just haunted. I was responsible. Someone had been taken again, and I didn't know who, or where, or how to stop it. All I knew was the music would play again tonight, and I'd be forced to choose again. Or let the box continue deciding who deserved to stay, and who had to leave. I spent the day pacing the house like a prisoner, afraid to touch the music box, terrified not to. Every creak in the floor made my pulse spike. The box sat silently on the mantel, watching me like it was alive, waiting. It had chosen again. Someone was gone. But who? That was the worst part. Not knowing, not being able to stop it. It felt like the box wasn't just pulling souls from death anymore. It was rewriting the living. I walked into town, needing to breathe, to see someone, anyone, just to confirm the world was still real. But something was wrong. Familiar places looked slightly off. A mural on the bakery wall, once of children laughing, was now an empty field. A missing poster fluttered on a lamppost. A man I'd never seen before, with a name I didn't recognize. But everyone else acted like he had always been here, and now he was gone. It was rewriting the town, erasing people from memory. I stopped by the library, desperate for someone to listen, someone to understand. The head librarian, Miss Abernathy, was always kind. When I asked her if she remembered Marcus, the neighbor who vanished, she frowned. No one lives in that house, dear. It's been empty for years. No. I slammed my hand on the counter. I know him. I talked to him. I've been in his kitchen. She flinched. Then, gently, she reached across the desk and touched my wrist. Ivy, she whispered, you should go home and rest. You've been under a lot of stress. She didn't remember Marcus. The box had erased him, and I hadn't even said his name, which meant the box could now decide, freely. It didn't need my permission. It was hungry. When I got home, I found muddy footprints leading from the front door to my bedroom. I hadn't left the door open. I followed them, heart hammering in my chest, knife clenched in my hand. They led to the closet. I swung the door open. Empty, except for the photo album on the floor, one I hadn't looked at in years. I flipped it open. My parents, me, and someone else. A boy. I didn't recognize him, but he was in nearly every photo. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, by the lake. His face blurred the longer I stared at it, like the box was UN writing him from my memory even as I tried to hold on. Suddenly, behind me, the music began. Not 3:33 yet. Not even close. But it was playing anyway. The melody, twisted and slow, echoed through the vents. I toned. The box was open. Standing beside it, my grandmother. You've waited too long, she said. It's growing stronger. I backed away. This is your fault. You made the deal. Why me? Her voice was hollow. Because you carry my blood. The pact is inherited. And now, you must finish what I started. I screamed. How? How do I end it? There's only one way, she whispered. Close the gate. How? She held out a key. Small. Rusted. I hesitated. Then took it. What does it open? The resting place. I blinked. What? She leaned closer. The original burial ground. The souls it was meant for. You must return it to where it began. And just like that, she vanished. I stared at the key. Something ancient pulsed in it, like it had a heartbeat. That night, as 3:33 approached, I packed a bag, flashlight, salt, a compass, and the music box. I followed the key's pull, literally. The closer I moved toward the woods of the town's edge, the warmer the key became in my pocket. The forest was darker than I'd ever remembered. The trees closed in like ribs around a blackened heart. Then I found it. A clearing. A stone circle, half buried in moss. And in the center, a rusted gate leading underground. No one had ever told me about crypts out here. I unlocked the gate. It groaned open with the sound of metal screaming. Stairs led down into earth. I descended. The air grew colder. My breath fogged. The smell of rotten damp stone pressed into my skin. At the bottom, rows of coffins. Open, empty, and in the center of it all, an altar. I placed the music box there. It began to play. I hadn't wound it, but it played anyway. Figures rose from the shadows. All of them. Marcus, Eliza, the miner, the headless man, the woman with the backward neck, my grandmother, 100 more. They surrounded me. You brought it home, they whispered. This is where it ends. I stepped back. You want me to bury it? No, one said. We want you to stay. Then I realized the price was in the box. It was me. They didn't want to go back. They wanted someone to take their place. My hand brushed the key. It was ice cold now. I turned to run, but the ground shifted. Bones erupted from the earth. Hands reached from the crypt walls. I screamed, stumbled, fell to the floor. Ivy, Eliza said, kneeling beside me. Her eyes were soft now. If you don't stay, someone else will. Someone you love. I don't have anyone left. I gasped. Yes, you do. She placed a hand on my chest. Images flashed before my eyes. My cousin Rachel, my godson Ezra, my best friend Janine. People I hadn't seen in years. People the box could still take, if I didn't give it a final name. Mine. I stood, tears streaming down my cheeks. I reached for the box, and I said, I choose me. The music stopped. Silence. A wind swept through the crypt. The dead sighed in unison and vanished. The air warmed. The box clicked shut for the final time. I opened my eyes, and I was alone. No ghosts, no whispers, just a stone room, crumbling and cold. I crawled back up the stairs and collapsed outside the gate as the sun began to rise. The key had turned to ash in my pocket. The music box was gone, and the silence was beautiful. I didn't go back to the house right away. For 3 days, I stayed at a roadside motel on the edge of town. The air was thin and dry, but it didn't carry whispers. The walls didn't breathe. And for the first time in weeks, I slept. No music, no faces, no dreams. But even in the silence, the memory clung to me, like the scent of fire on your closed days after the flames are gone. I had said my name to the box, chosen myself as a final offering, and in doing so, I had ended it. Or so I thought. The motel clerk, an older man with a voice like gravel, mentioned something strange on the morning I checked out. You from around here? He asked, squinting. Yeah, I said. Just needed a break from things. He scratched his beard. Weird power flickers the last few nights. Around 3:30. Always at 3:33. Actually, clock resets every night, like it jumps back. My throat tightened. Just faulty wiring. Maybe, he said, but didn't sound convinced. Still, odd. I forced a smile. Thanks. But I felt the lie inside my bones. Back at the house, everything looked the same on the outside, but the moment I crossed the threshold, I knew something had changed. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was expectant, like the house was waiting. I walked room to room, touched the walls, ran my fingers over the scorched carpet in the hallway where Eliza had once stood. All was still. The attic was exactly how I left it, dust-covered, cold, but the diary was gone. No sign of Elsie, no sign of the music box. And yet, at 3:33 a.m. that night, I still found myself sitting upright in bed, staring at the wall, listening for something I knew shouldn't exist anymore. But nothing came, just silence. And yet, I couldn't stop checking. The next night, and the next, always at 3:33. I told myself it was just a habit, a scar. But deep down, I feared the truth. Maybe I had closed the gate, but I had also become it. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a note, handwritten in old ink. You ended the story for now. But stories like this are never finished. They sleep, like bones beneath a lake. Like songs that wait for someone to press play again. Be careful who you give your silence to, because sometimes silence answers back. That night, the dreams returned, but not of the dead, of the box, buried, half-rutted, underneath the altar in the crypt where I left it, and someone digging it up. Not me. A child. In the dream. He wound it with innocent fingers. It clicked. The melody began, and the camera of my dream zoomed in on the child's face as he smiled and whispered. I heard it calling. I woke drenched in sweat. I drove out to the crypt again. The forest felt smaller this time, more twisted, like it had grown in on itself. I followed the old path, now overrun with weeds. But when I reached the clearing, there was nothing. No gate, no stone circle, just forest floor and roots, as if the earth had sealed it up, as if it had moved on. I stood there for what felt like hours. But I didn't go digging, because part of me knew. That's how it starts again. So instead, I returned home. I lit candles. I wrote down everything, every detail, every horror, every death, just in case it ever begins again. And I left instructions. If you find this story, and you ever hear a music box play faintly in the distance, not near you, not in your home, but close, just close enough to wonder, don't follow it, don't listen, and above all, don't look at the clock, because if it's 3:33, it's already too late.